Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton, very sleepy Joshua Hatton, with One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I'm joined today, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, my business partner, Mr. Jason Neil Patrick Bors Johnson. Not Boris Johnson. Boris Borg? No, I didn't do that. I'm just trying to give you more names.
Oh, yeah, that's not a name we need to add to that list. I figure once I've told you how much I like the Jason Neil Patrick Harris Johnston Yellen, you're like, okay, he likes that. Let's give him something he doesn't like. Yeah. So, Jason Neil Patrick Harris Boris Johnson Yellen. Nope, no thank you. Hard pass.
Well, my view of you right now has your microphone in front of your face so that you kind of look like you're part of the Borg from Star Trek's The Next Generation. And when I said Borg, you had quoted a name that has nothing to do with Star Trek. Beyond Borg? Is that like one of those new vegan burgers?
I knew you were going to hear Beyond in that. He was Swedish. Bjorn.
Bjorn Borg. Say that three times.
Famous rival of John McEnroe.
Bjorn Borg. That's a hard one to do three times.
Well, he won 5 Wimbledon, so there you go.
Oh, there you go. Well, anyway, Jason, this is me talking to you from San Francisco, and you actually just got back from a bit of time out in L.A.
I did.
And I haven't spoken with you since you came back. What was L.A. like? Why were you out there?
It's true. L.A. was an excellent little visit, actually. Got to spend some time with our collaborators from the Water of Life film.
All right.
So that was very cool. Got to do a tasting at the very famous Tam O'Shanter in Glendale for the very first time. Mm-hmm. And so that was very cool. John, their spirits buyer there, and Martin, one of their lead whiskey experts, are both terrific guys. And so that made for a very easy evening. We got a crowd who came out who were very receptive to what was being poured. Now, as much as my time in LA was retail focused, and I went around a number of retailers and had conversations with them, not on wax, not on the padcost, but instead thing about, well, first of all, thanks for supporting Single Cask Nation in retail. Yeah. Really means the world to myself and Joshua. Mm-hmm. And then I got to say, what are you seeing here? What are you seeing customers looking for? What are your customers looking for? As you look over a number of retail store collections, there's not a lot of independent bottles on shelves in the LA area, or at least if a store has gone Single Cask Nation, they may also go another couple of IBs, but not add the full gamut. Or you might see a couple of bottles here from someone else, a couple of bottles there from someone else to begin to make up those names. But as I kind of sit and think, I obviously saw Single Malts of Scotland on shelves next to us. I saw Signatory on shelves next to us. And then most common, I saw Gordon MacPhail and Cadenheads. And that was really what I was seeing on shelves in the stores that I was in. And so, and then, of course, and I think this speaks to a recent Extra, I was actually quite surprised how many full OB offerings were on shelves. So I would see 5 or 6 Old Pulteney offerings. I would see 6 or 7 Glenmurray offerings.
Okay.
You would see 5 or 6 Ardbeg offerings. Obviously, Ardbeg's one we have talked about. That the line is quite well known there. But I was surprised, and I think it speaks to the evolution of our industry, and again, comes straight from the episode of Extra Extra where we covered Gordon MacPhail, where instead of OBs, home distilleries, putting out a 12-year-old, a 15, an 18, a 21, maybe a 25, there's a whole load of cask expressions. Ages go off in different directions, right? There's maybe now a 17. Oh, I will. I nearly took a photo and sent it to you, but I thought, no, I'll tell them on the podcast. You and I talked about the discontinued 16-year-old Annoch way back in our episode where we'd actually gone over each of our 5 essential whiskey bottlings that should be on your shelf. Yeah. And we talked about, we really miss the 16. And I'd said, apparently there's an 18-year-old coming that's 100% bourbon. I saw it at a store in Glendale, was I? Pasadena. Okay. I was in Pasadena when I saw it on a shelf there, and I thought of you. And it was in the cabinet, and it was next to us. So
amazing. So the way you were describing shops doesn't seem like a surprise to me. Were you expecting these shops to simply have a wider array of IB, independently bottled whiskeys, and because you thought that's what they were known for, or
not necessarily? I think one of the things we talk about is we live in a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche, and so I predominantly talk IBs with everybody I drink with, right? When I'm going online and placing bottle orders, I'm looking at IBs, and I might round out my order with an OB here, an interesting OB there, that's an interesting cask over there. All right, okay, I'll add that OB. But to actually walk into a store and be faced with such an array from OB and then a small spattering of IB, was kind of that's the inverse of how I live my whiskey life. That was noticeable to me. The other thing, if you've noticed the pattern, when you and I are talking about what's being seen in retail right now, I always put that ball squarely in your court, because you're out there. You're the one selling the Impex portfolio, right? You're in retail stores so much more than I am, right? And so for me to be the one walking into stores wearing the single cask nation hat, looking at it through an IB lens, it's like, okay, what are we seeing here? Yeah. And then that's the point where, if you're just shopping online, you're able to curate what you're searching for, right? Yeah. It's pretty rare that you would go to an online liquor store and hit Scotch and then go through every single listing that they have in that category. But when you walk into a store, that's exactly what's happening. You've gone to the Scotch section and you're looking through, most likely, an alphabetical ordering of all those Scotch bottles. And then the interesting part is what goes on a shelf and what goes in a glass cabinet.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Right? And it used to be glass cabinets were pricey things. Yeah. And now glass cabinet was, I saw some of our own bottlings that were $100, $110. Yeah. They were in a glass cabinet, right? Why is that? Why is that off the shelf? Why is that in the glass cabinet? I understand if it's $5,500, it goes in a glass cabinet. I get that. But $100 seemed like an interesting spot for it.
I don't know. I think you're underselling single cask nation. I mean, that is prized stuff, Jason.
Oh, I thought you were saying that's what people want to steal.
Exactly. So they got to lock it up. Yeah, it's interesting. You say what you see the most as far as IBs go is Gordon MacPhail. When I had William from Isle of Rasay in New York, we were talking with some people about various IB brands, and in New York, there's barely any Gordon MacPhail, to the point where some people are saying, and of course we were there just a few weeks after the whole article about Gordon MacPhail looking to get away from IBs. There's some New Yorkers that are like, it's already starting. It's already starting. And I said, no, if you read the article, it basically said they'll be doing this basically for the next 100 years or so. But I said, I think what we're looking at is simply a distribution issue and nothing more. So I'm really glad that you saw that out there, because in New York, we're just not seeing a lot of it out there.
Wow. Yeah, I think the one that also really remains is Cadenheads. It's striking how many stores still have Cadenheads now. Whether those are new Cadenheads or they're sitting on Cadenheads, I'm not entirely sure, because, to be honest, I didn't ask questions about Cadenheads while I was standing there. But you get to see that kind of coverage of those. What is striking, and I hope this isn't talking out of school, I hope I'm heard to be wearing my whiskey consumer hat here, is Cadenheads have really changed their pricing structure. And they have gone from being you could get, the $60 single cask from Cadenheads that's now $120. And it's not that I think they're missing the mark on where their pricing is.
Yeah.
It's more the fact of where they've come from to where they are now, right? And it's when you cut out multiple years of price increases and then it all happens overnight. It's quite striking, but I don't think their pricing is off. So I don't. There was someone else. Oh, actually, a retail store owner said that to me about Glenfarclas, where he had Glenfarclas on his shelves, and he said, they really increased the pricing on this. And it's really hurt my sales of it. And again, we're talking an N of one retail store owner with one group of consumers to whom he sells. I'm not making a grand statement here about Glenfarclas or Sazerac. But what I'd said to him was, but they didn't increase their pricing for a long time. And I think when you then catch up with the marketplace, it looks like you double your price overnight. But you haven't. You just didn't increase it for a long time.
Yeah.
He kind of shrugged at that comment because he was still seeing the price he had it on his shelf for today.
There's so many reasons for all this stuff. And we can go, deep within a rabbit hole. I just think of the cost of energy in the UK right now. And that's just one factor. The cost of malt, that's more than doubled. The cost of oak. It used to be, if you wanted to get a bourbon barrel, it would cost you 80 pounds, 100 pounds. Now you're looking at 200, something like that, a bit closer to that. Oak's gone up, glass has gone up, everything has simply gone up. And in the case of the Obies, the owners bottling, the producers themselves, those are the things that you think about of what affects your overall cost. With IBs like Cadenheads, they're purchasing liquid from the producers, and eventually they're going to run out of some of that older liquid that costs a little less, and they got to work into some of the newer liquid that cost a bit more. So, it's these things that are difficult to explain to people because you can so easily be blinded by new big price, and you can't really hear or absorb the whys and what fors behind all that.
Well, and to close the loop on what we've just been chatting about here, that was the very reason for Gordon and MacPhail's announcement, right? You can't control your pricing when you're buying it from a third party. Yeah. How do you control your pricing? You bring it in-house. Yeah. Now they know what they're producing a litre of alcohol at in any given year, month, or day. Like that's a game changer if you're an IB, right? It's a game changer because you've gone from an IB to an OB. That's why the game has changed. So Gordon MacPhail's announcement to focus on their two distilleries makes absolute perfect sense. It is interesting because I think you and I, in covering it, talked about some positives for them and all of that, and we talked about oh, and now every cask in the warehouse becomes rarer and your price goes up. But listen to the detriment that you already laid out in this intro, is people read that article and said, oh, I think it's already started. How many people don't go back to a liquor store and ask for Gordon MacPhail or look for Gordon MacPhail IB, right? Even though you and I know from parsing the article, they're in this game for another 100 years.
Yeah.
But just that blanket announcement, that headline, now has some people saying, well, I don't need to look for Gordon MacPhail anymore. They're out of the business. Like, no.
Yeah.
Yep, not true. Not true.
Yeah, I really think you have to have a certain level of understanding of how an independent bottler works to fully grasp what's being told to you. You know, right. I'm here in San Francisco, and we're here for Whiskey and Barrel Night. It's at the Pleasanton Highland Games, which, you and I have been to before.
Indeed.
And so it's me and some other guys from Impex, Brian Devora, as you know, and a new guy.
Lovely.
It's a new hire, and we're with Sam, of course. Oh, and the most important, we have Ollie and Chanel with us too, Oliver Chilton and Chanel LaCour. So that's been wonderful. But what I'm trying to get to is the newer guy comes from years in the beer world. Fantastic salesman, knows his beer inside and out, knows his beer like we know our whiskey, right? But when I'm sitting and having a conversation with Ollie and Chanel and getting into some of the weeds, which to us as we're talking seems a bit surface. In hindsight, it obviously wasn't, because he said, there were times where I was struggling trying to understand what you were saying, because this is new to me. I don't really understand the context. I don't understand, you're talking about this bottling or that bottling or, this yeast and that. And it was quite clear to me that while we were having this conversation where we're all on the same level and understanding the nuances, simply because we've had years of creating context that allows us to navigate that conversation with utter ease. And so here he is as a guy from the beer world, just getting into whiskey, not just getting into whiskey, but getting more into whiskey and learning about these inner workings that we're just talking about now with Gordon MacPhail. He doesn't have the tools or the language to fully absorb what's being said. And he's a guy that actually knows whiskey and is starting to learn more. So the people who don't really know whiskey are going to struggle and are going to do what you just said. Yeah, you have to have you have to be in the know. Those in the know independent bottling.
Well, wait till your man starts walking into retail store after retail store and they start presenting the same problem over and over and over again to him. He's gonna get in the weeds real fast.
Yeah.
So did you do any tastings, any pourings? Did you get a chance to eyeball the public in your early moments in San Francisco?
Yeah, I did. We hit a few shops and a few bars, just presenting items that are for sale from our distributor, JVS. But then I did an event at a private club, which was really interesting. So, it's different from the scenario you're talking about with these California laws, where you can only pour so much and you can only do this and blah, blah, blah. Here you are, you're in a private club. You could do what you want in the private club because it's a private club. And so it was me, Ollie, and Chanel, and we're pouring a combination of single cask nation, single malts of Scotland, Port Escaig, and elements of Islay. And, man, they were expecting 20 people to come in maybe, because everybody's on vacation. Burning Man is happening. It's the Labor Day weekend. There's all these things. If there weren't closer to 60 people there, it was really great.
Awesome.
So it was just very nice, intimate, able to have some conversations with people who didn't really know independent bottling. Some of them did, and some of them recognized Ollie's name. But people who were just interested in, the there's a lot of businessmen and women that work with the club, and they wanted to understand the business aspect of how it works. And I thought that those conversations that I kind of enjoy at times.
I try not to belabor the business point and try to get it back to distilleries and excitement and grain. And once you're on global logistics, like you go to a dark place.
No, it wasn't that. I mean, I'm talking about exactly what we're talking about now, right? The inner workings, like how does whiskey get from one place to the next, from the producer to the bottling hall, from the producer's warehouse to the bottler's warehouse, and just how the system works. It's the same story that we tell when we're doing a class, but they understand it from a business level and a logistics level.
Were they asking the age-old question on why a producer would sell to an independent bottler in the first place?
No one asked that, but I was waiting for it, and so I cut them off at the pass. So, no, I mean, think about it. If you have your Glenlivet 12-year-old and it starts tasting different, that's an issue. So Glenlivet makes other great liquid. It just doesn't have the same flavor profile. And they're like, oh, okay, I get that. And so it was a nice way to just sort of cut them off at the pass.
Well, it's remarkable, right? We're sitting here talking. I'm just back from LA, got a week, and then I'm off to Scotland. You're in San Francisco. You're home for a week, less than a week, and then you're off to Scotland. We've currently got Jess in Newcastle doing an independent bottler festival. We must get her on wax to hear how that went, share that with the listeners. But she gets back from Newcastle and immediately goes to Israel, and she's doing a master class at Whiskey Live in Tel Aviv. So, and then she comes back, I think the same day or the day before. You land in Scotland, and you get to Scotland the day before I land in Scotland. So, what a time for us! All three of us are out and about, spreading the single cast nation word. This is good. This is the very beginning of September.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
It's going to be a busy October, November.
So, yeah.
Should we transition?
Yeah, please, because I don't want to be reminded of just how busy we are.
So as the masthead suggests, today's interview is with Dion of the Mixing Glass in Costa Mesa in Orange County. Depending on traffic, it's about 40-45 minutes outside of LA.
Okay.
And we have known Gabby for a good while now. Our very own Elijah made the introduction. Can I still call him our very own? Our formerly very own Elijah made the introduction.
Oh, he's still in my heart, Jason.
He's still in our hearts. He's still ours in our hearts. And so he made the introduction. I've done tastings at the Mixing Glass, at the previous Mixing Glass. This go around, we talked about doing a tasting at the new Mixing Glass. In the interview, Gabby talks about the pours that can be done, the presenter who needs to be in place.
Yeah.
But it's a wonderful, far-ranging conversation. We talk about her beginning in cocktails. We talk about her connections to the kitchen, to the chefing world. We talk about the first Mixing Glass, the new Mixing Glass. I even ask for a little recommendation on something off-piste that I will leave that as a teaser for people to go on and listen and enjoy the conversation in here. But far-ranging, really wonderful, and a really cool person to just sit and hang out with. And I think that comes across in today's interview. Dion, thanks very much for having me at the Mixing Glass today.
Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for my lunch. That sandwich was dynamite.
I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad I had a vegetarian option today.
You know, as soon as I tasted it, I was like, Josh would totally be rocking this. It was absolutely in his wheelhouse as well. And as we were having lunch, you said it's an artichoke spread?
Yeah, I take grilled artichokes and then I make like a spread out of it using lemon zest, confit garlic, olive oil, a little lemon juice, salt and pepper. That's it. But it's like, it should be on everything. I actually spread it on a plate and then put an arugula salad on top of it with shaved pecorino and then just crush that with like a piece of protein on the side.
Oh my gosh.
Well, for me, a piece of protein. For you, maybe like a plate of beans or something. I'm sorry, I'm terrible. So meat-centric over here.
You could put a quinoa salad over the top of that and absolutely crush it as well. All right, so we've jumped in at the end. Let's circle this back a little bit. So we've known you for a good number of years. We were introduced through Elijah.
Yes.
Back when he was still repping JVS in Orange County. Mm-hmm. The mixing glass where we're sitting is in Orange County. Is this Costa Mesa?
It is Costa Mesa.
Okay, this is Costa Mesa. So you, for the last 11 months, have been in a new facility. Mm-hmm. You came from a much smaller facility.
Oh, yeah.
But before we get to that part of the story, we are going to talk about retail and selections and curating selections. But let's go back to, maybe not the beginning of your adult life, but I've known about your interest in cocktails and your... Did you ever, here's the first truth question here, did you ever call yourself a mixologist?
I tried to avoid it at all costs.
You're our kind of people.
But we still got called it.
Did anyone ever call themselves a cocktail artist?
A cocktologist, I heard a few times. I guess I could go either direction with that name.
That's so good. So how did you get into cocktails? Where was the spark for that? Where was the interest?
You know, I was bartending at P.F. Chang's in 2004 or 5. My memory's spotty for many reasons. And I really was pretty cocky. I thought I knew everything. But I was 22, I think. And then I went on a trip with my then boyfriend, now husband, Chris, to Brooklyn. And we sat at a bar, and I could not tell you what I was looking at. The entire back bar was foreign, and my interest was piqued. I came home, and I tried to find bars here that were like that.
Oh, wow.
Mostly in L.A., obviously not in Orange County as of yet. And that was what opened the, let's not make Mai Tais out of orange juice, grenadine in a really tall glass with a ridiculous cherry flag. That was the P.F. Chang's way.
Okay.
And I found like-minded people around me, and we all kind of banded together and tried to educate each other, educate our community, and try to bring Orange County into, the 21st century.
Yes. Were there key flavors that you were interested in, tripping on, following down, or
initially it was Amaro. I fell down an Amaro rabbit hole early on. I had traveled to Italy when I was maybe even the year prior, just by coincidence, and didn't get Amaro at all there. I never even saw one, which is pretty funny. I think they just love to offer tourists limoncello.
Absolutely.
Or Vinsanto. Sweet stuff, because we're Americans. And then, they were so peculiar to me because they had such a wide variance of sweet, of bitter, of flavors, of, alpine and burnt orange. There were so many flavor profiles, and nobody could really clearly define it at the time. I even went to a New York-based education program called Bar 5 Day back in 2005 or 6, and they didn't even have an education portion on Amaro at that point.
Oh, wow.
It was like tossed in with cordials and liqueurs, and I think we spent 15 minutes on it, and there was kind of a little bit of pushback at the time, like, when can we get more? And, they expanded pretty quickly after that.
So I do have an Amaro question for you.
Okay.
So I've been making, oh gosh, I'm going to put myself on the spot here. Is it a black Manhattan?
Yeah.
That gets made with rye?
Mm-hmm.
And there's Amaro in that?
Yeah. Generally, it's a Verna.
Yes.
That's like the classic.
Yeah. So is a Verna, that's like a go-to bottle. It's got maybe the gold label.
Yeah, it's like...
So my question to you is there an Amaro I could be using for my Black Manhattan that would elevate and take
Absolutely.
me beyond the shelf staple?
Averna's very... I don't want to call it one note because I think it's a beginner Amaro. But it is not bitter. It is like more almost like, hints of like coffee and chocolate and things like that. But it's pretty pedestrian is a terrible word, but it's entry level Amaro. But there are lots that can take you in different directions. If you want to stay close to the same vein with a little bit more interest, I would try Amaro Chiocharo. I would try Bigalais Kina Kina. Both of those are delicious. Bigalais Kina Kina actually comes from France. But they both have that same dark, not too bitter, but still has like some bitterness to it. They both have like hints of orange. They play great in a Black Manhattan.
Oh.
They also play really great in a whiskey sour too.
Okay.
But that's a really great way to go. But you can also get kind of weird and like as you get more comfortable with bitter qualities, you can try things that like Chinar. But Chinar is definitely going to be more bitter.
So, longtime listener James Foster wrote in with a cocktail recipe featuring Chinar. And Josh and I promptly called it Sinar and got a text or an email from another longtime listener just saying, like, I think it's actually Chinar. But he made a rusty artichoke and it was Wee Beastie meets Chinar.
Okay.
And it sounded terrific by all accounts. I didn't have any Chinar in the house. I hadn't made any. But you're then saying Chinar will take you down a more bitter route?
Right, but with that same, because there's other Amaros that have like heavy alpine notes, right? So you're picking up pine and that kind of thing, and they tend to be a bit more sweet. So what ends up happening if you switch for something that's like maybe more bitter or more sweet is it skews the cocktail, and your 2-to-1 proportion kind of goes out the window. If you did a 2-to-1 proportion on a sweet Amaro like Montenegro, it would be unpalatable. You'd probably want to go a half ounce instead, but then it's not a Black Manhattan, it's something else. Maybe more like take it on an old fashioned, but that's for
also
another
fantastic.
conversation. Yeah.
So Josh and I have talked about this, and we've had other cocktail people on the podcast as well. I am a big fan of 3-ingredient cocktails. I already struggle to remember 3-ingredient cocktail recipes. For you, in your history with cocktails, even currently with cocktails, do you have a comfort zone that is multi-ingredient? Is it more like a recipe where you're thinking, well, if I put X in it, I have to put Y in it, and if the flavor profile of X is that way, then I need, to balance it with this percentage of Y. Like, are you thinking of cocktails like a chef, or have you got a Rolodex in the brain where you're like, name of cocktail, ingredient list, boom, put it together?
I'm operate more like a chef. That's my background. My dad was a culinary artist. My sister as well. They, taught me flavors, and that is kind of my memory's terrible. I did a pretty good amount of drugs in my youth. I have 2 kids. I balance way too many plates. So I always envied the bartenders I worked with who'd be like, oh, let me just think of the most esoteric cocktail from 1865. And they've got the whole spec in their head. I'm not embarrassed to look up an old drink that I don't know. There's plenty of 3-ingredient old drinks like the Last Word and the Negroni and those things that will get you very far. But I'm constantly teaching people like how to spontaneously make drinks at home, not based off recipes, based off of like a format, or Mr. Potato Head, we call it. Like you take off Mr. Potato Head's smile and put on a frown, or you put on his crazy eyes or whatever. So you're swapping out ingredients. So you take a basic old-fashioned recipe, and instead of it being the same thing every time, which is bourbon, a sweetener, and bitters, you can change out the sweetener, you can change out the spirit, you can change out the bitters. And you've got a different drink for every day of the month. You know, your base spirit does not have to be bourbon. It can be mezcal. Your sweetener can be agave. It could be, you know, an ancho liqueur instead of like actual sweetener. So we have formulas for all of that. You know, and I stick to them because they are generally work very well.
Interesting.
But like, you know, margarita is another great example. It's a sour spec, right? And you can swap out the lime juice, but if you swap it out for grapefruit, are you going to get the same acidity? No. So that's where my brain's working, and I'm constantly like, all right, well, if I'm swapping out for grapefruit, I still need to fortify it with a little bit of acid, meaning lime or lemon.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So even with grapefruit going on in there, you would still have citrus doing a job.
Yeah, because we call grapefruit, orange juice, pineapple juice half sours. They're not full sours like a lemon or a lime. Meyer lemon, another half sour. So if I want to use those juices because they offer so much flavor and interest, then I still need to have a little backbone. So I usually will drop down the full acid to a 1/4 ounce, and then the half acid's like a 1/2 ounce. That's a lot of nerdy shit. Sorry.
No, that's fantastic. I love the animation to you here. I can tell you're still digging cocktails.
Yeah, I don't drink a lot of them these days, but even I just can't shake the background in cocktails. You know, you try to reinvent yourself. You try to reinvent yourself, and the people just still want cocktails, which is great. And it's what I do probably best. You know, I'm dabbling in cooking, I'm dabbling in wine, and I still do cocktails best.
So what then led you from the cocktail days to the opening of the first mixing glass? And when was that?
Yeah, so I was bartending, running bars in 2012 when I got pregnant with my first kid. I tried continuing the bar after I went back, after my maternity leave, which was about, a couple months. And I was up till 2 a.m. and then trying to get up with a baby at 6 or feedings in the middle of the night, and I couldn't do it. Not for long, at least. So one of my friends was like, you should open a shop. There's a couple scattered around the country that are amazing. There's nothing like that in Orange County. His name is Bobby Navarro. I will always credit him for pushing me because he definitely pushed me, took me down to the city, was like, let's ask them some questions. Because that concept was not present here. We wanted to teach people how to make cocktails, set up cocktail sets. And we really had to get like a specialty permit to open in Costa Mesa. And so by the time all that passed, it was 2014, I kept my toe in bars by doing cocktail menus for a group that's based in Orange County called the Vaca Group. And I continued with them until 2020, right at the pandemic. I got laid off at that point with them. But the truth is, I was always distracted. I'm trying to run my own store and do my own thing, but I'm also doing other things as well. So, that store ran for 8 years in the 300 square foot space that it was. We always called it small but mighty. We bought our own barrel picks and sold them out real quick. We had in-person cocktail classes that would sell out in, under 5 minutes. And it was all great. And things changed a little bit during the pandemic, as it did for everybody.
Sure. So I definitely want to talk pandemic, but one of the things I think our listeners enjoy hearing is you said 5, 6 years, 7 years in that space. What trends did you see? What did you see start from nothing and burn bright and then fade away? And what kind of surprised you? It's an open-ended question. But
there were so many things. I mean, first, we really were crushing sales of tools to begin with because you couldn't find a good jigger, bar spoon, mixing glass, shaker tins, things like that. And they we loved selling those. They were also the highest margin we had in the store.
Smart.
You know, liquor people in retail always think everybody has 50% margin on things, and you're like, we in spirits, wine, and beer do not. So, but it is not a consumable item. Eventually, the sales of that dribble away because you've got your audience, and they slow their buying of that or completely stop because you don't need to buy another set of stainless steel tins. And so we shifted more towards whiskey at that time, and you're talking 2014, 2015. That was our biggest selling category. We were, selling McKenna for $28 a bottle, and
That's it.
Eagle Rare, things I cannot get now, literally, because we're so small. So we get no allocations, zero. In fact, that gives me a little chance to bone pick with Sazerac, who has now become with a beer distributor out here. And we were like, we just want to get the basic stuff we've always had, like Eagle Rare. And they told us we had to buy 150 cases of their other things before we could get one case of Eagle Rare.
Wow.
You're talking about one of their entry-level bourbons.
Wow.
I was used to getting thrown around for, I didn't ever ask for any of the Buffalo Trace Antique collections or the Pappies because we didn't have the volume.
Okay.
But I expected I could still order Buffalo Trace and Eagle Rare. I was wrong. We are an anti-Sazerac house as of 2023. We don't carry any Sazerac products.
Okay. Whoa. We just dropped some truths in here, Gabby.
Yeah. How am I supposed to do that?
Shit just got real fast.
You spend all this time building these brands and then they turn their fucking back on you, pardon my French, because you're too small?
Well, there's no reward for that loyalty that you're talking about in 2013, 14, 15, right?
Right.
There's no, you were there doing your best. That's fine. We're getting a delivery. Not a worries.
All right.
Not a worries.
Delivery coming in.
Yeah, we can take a pause. Let the delivery come through.
Moving right along. Footloose and fancy free.
Getting there is half the fun. Come share it with me.
Moving right along.
And we're back from our successful delivery there. So we were talking about trends, things you'd seen.
Yeah.
We had a moment discussing Sazerac. And so what else? What else were you seeing? Were at that point, were you getting Japanese bottles before they became allocated?
We were. In fact, again, I was a relationship. Again, I had a relationship with the local Beam rep down here, and he was giving me basically what I wanted, not what what my volume indicated.
Okay.
Which was really nice. And as soon as he was gone, that relationship was gone. He moved on to another company, and we didn't have that anymore. Yeah. But we were, we had a little bottle of empty Pappy on the counter with a skull and crossbones coming out of it that said, "Don't ask." Because it was 1 foot in the threshold. Do you have Pappy Van Winkle?
Yes.
And no. And I'm not going to look at anything else in your store. Great. And then that changed to Yamazaki.
Okay, yeah.
And it was it would not go away.
Yeah.
And for a while we did have it. And then eventually that dried up. It turned into Foursquare for about, 6 months. That was a flash in the pan.
Oh, interesting.
And people were asking about Foursquare all the time. And then it became allocated. And then, I don't know. It didn't last as long, at least here.
Interesting. Yeah, Foursquare is still one that when we put out a Foursquare, there's huge demand for it.
It's
and Foursquare is something we
delicious.
get asked about a lot from Single Cast Nation.
Yeah, we love Richard Seal and his mission and the others that in the rum world, like Luca Gargano, that are singing those same messages.
Yep.
But rum has not caught on here as much as we would like. I'm not sure if that's an Orange County thing. I certainly go to Europe and think, my God, look at all this beautiful stuff they have here.
Okay.
There's a rum shop in Paris called, I think it's called Excellence Rum, but it's probably pronounced in a French way. And they are amazing. It is so fun to visit that store. I nerd out with them, and they will pour me things and taste, and I usually leave with $600 in damage, maybe more.
I won't ask how you get back to the
I
US.
split it onto different credit cards so nobody really knows what's going on, including myself.
So from those kind of trends, I've always known you as somebody curating a very special in-house selection. Did customers really take to that? Obviously, you've talked about having cocktail making classes and clearly your expertise with cocktails. Did that enable customers to put their faith in you? And as you're saying, here is an Amaro, give that a try. Don't maybe do your Averna for a little bit. Did customers come naturally to that? Did you enjoy that role?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, seeing the confidence grow in each person on our picks was very,
lovely,
very nice. They still to this day will come into this location and say how much they loved going to the old location and having, Tessa and Yanko be such like amazing ambassadors of good spirits and fun cocktails. And we saw cocktail trends change too. Like we were selling 300 Moscow Mule cups in like kits a year in the beginning. And then that went down to like 20 a couple years later. And then, there was like always the pushback on gin, and that faded, and now people are gin crazy.
Yeah.
And that never goes away. Gin is constantly in our top performing categories. It's gin, agave, whiskey is dipped for us a bit. And then we always have strong performers in like cordials and Amaros because you can't find the selection we have anywhere really. And certainly even if you can find that selection, the people that work in that retailer perhaps do not know as much as, we do about each bottle. And that sets us apart for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know how quickly you could call this to mind, but did you ever have an experience where you thought there was a product that was an absolute slam dunk that just never found an audience?
Yeah, brandy. I love brandy so much.
Oh.
I love Calvados. I love young Calvados.
Okay.
I have a thing with aging of spirits. I think for me, it's like 8 years is the sweet spot, depending, of course, on the climate, right?
Sure.
Older rum, older Scotch, younger rum, maybe. But like a young Calvados with tonic water in a cocktail, like, will blow your mind. But I always want to see brandy doing better, and it just never picks up. And even if, in the winter months, I can convince people to make a couple cocktails with brandy, I'm still not getting them to sip on things. And, they tend, if they're going age spirit, they tend to reach for whiskey over and over again. And, we get that response with rum that it's too sweet, and it's this American idea that rum is sweet.
Yeah, it's a strange statement.
Right. I mean, people have been fooled for years by drinking rum that is artificially sweetened.
Yeah.
Or not,
Yeah.
And so there's their perception, and I'm just like, please try this. It's it's got more bang for your buck than this, and it'll do you fine. But brandy definitely, I think, would be my answer for that.
All right. Oh, I wish I'd known that. We just sold out of our 1989 cognac. Single cask.
Well then.
Sorry about that. It just got awkward up in here. Okay, so then you've got the 300 square foot store, and then you have the brainwave, or maybe did you reconceive of your concept? What led to I'm going to move to a store that's not 300 square feet, and I'm going to outfit it from bare concrete walls and pillars that were in the wrong places?
Oh, man, the pillars. Well, there were a couple different iterations of where the concept was going to go. I knew it couldn't just stay in there forever. I really enjoyed that space because it is very much like an incubator area. There's a lot of small businesses who couldn't necessarily rent a 1,500 square foot place to start with.
Okay.
And so starting small works, but eventually you grow out of that. Not necessarily because of the space, but because, the ownership of the buildings changed and they didn't keep up with marketing, and then the pandemic happened, and we were a necessary business, so we were open, and everything else was shuttered. So we did not we did not experience the same growth that other liquor stores experienced because we were, not street facing.
Yeah.
So that expedited the need to get out of there, and then. A small business like mine that's been in business for 9 years doesn't necessarily have access to funding or good funding. And the SBA loans that came out and offered to small businesses because of the pandemic was our first chance to really be able to put money into our own business and grow.
Okay.
And that I think people don't talk enough about, because I know a lot of people like me took advantage of it, and it's not, I am paying it back, but the rates are, unbelievable, and the terms are unbelievable, and for a small business, it's hard to get that kind of money.
Interesting.
But we originally, before the pandemic, I wanted to open a place that was saddled with a bar, because that's my background. But again, the pandemic kind of opened my eyes to not really wanting to be into that service aspect of working late nights again. So we all centered ourselves and realized what was important. And I was mentally saved by businesses like this in LA, like this market where you could go and basically buy food and drink like a European.
Yes.
Yep. Eat some beautiful tinned fish or some charcuterie and cheese, and not, have no time and go through a drive-through. So that definitely formed this concept as well, because we are not just liquor and cocktails anymore. We have wine, we have beer, we have pantry items and cheese and charcuterie and sandwiches, and we're applying our same ideals and curation that we did to spirits and cocktails and bitters and things like that to all of the other new categories.
I know during the pandemic you were running a ton of online tastings, Zoom cocktail classes. I remember at one point I talked to you and you were sending out hundreds of tasting kits or creation kits, cocktail kits. Now that you've got the liquor store or liquor sales with a market, are you able to do in-house cocktail classes here? I know licensing is... California in some ways seems wide open, like they've got it all figured out. You just said Target, which you can buy a desk lamp and a chair to nurse your baby in, and a cot, and a new pair of non-leather shoes, and a bottle of whiskey, and almond milk, all at Target. So it seems on one hand it's all figured out, and then the other hand, I know there are some places where they don't have the licensing to even pour a sample for a customer on a bottle they would want to purchase, which is mind-boggling to me. Are you able to do in-house cocktail classes?
No.
Because
of the California laws.
That's wild, man.
Yeah, their idea is, they have loosened a little bit, meaning that now we can do in-store tastings that are led by the brand.
Okay.
They can pour a small amount. It's a 1/4 ounce.
Okay.
Up to 3 tastes per customer.
Okay.
So generally we'll do a Saturday tasting, and we'll have, someone such as yourself pick 3 SKUs that they want to show everybody, and you can stand there and talk to everybody, and it cannot be led by myself.
That's so wild.
It is so wild.
You're curating selections for customers.
Yeah.
You know a thing or two, and you're not allowed to open 3 bottles from your shelves that you maybe brought in a 6-pack of and you'd like to move them out the door?
Nope. That would be required different license. There's so many, the liquor license are attached to numbers. There's 21, 41, 47, 48, 40. There's all these different ones, and they all mean something different. So we're considered an off-premise, which means consumption is not done on-premise.
Yes.
On-premise would be restaurants, bars, places with wine and beer licenses, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And they do not allow it. So we got around it at the last store by having it offsite in a space that was just adjacent to ours.
Okay.
And then we had a temporary permit pulled by a charity for every class that we did when they were in person.
Okay.
We're currently figuring out a similar situation for us for in-persons to come back at least quarterly, because we used to do them monthly before, and they were a lot more work than the virtual ones. So once I got a taste of the virtual ones, Yeah, because we didn't have a space that was already built. So for every class, we had to rent furniture, build the space, bring in all the glassware, bring in all the supplies, and then host the class for 2 hours, and then break everything down.
Okay.
So it was a total of 5 hours with 6 people working. Yeah, it was a bit different. And now there's still work that goes into these classes. We come up with the cocktails and demo them, and it's a lot of work. And now actually we have a working kitchen, so I get to make the ingredients. So we did like a smoked pineapple syrup for our rum class, and we made daiquiris with that, and we did a salted melon syrup for our last class, and the time before that was a Meyer lemon lavender cordial.
Oh my gosh!
And those were my skill sets running restaurants and bars was that I would be able to make these unique things. But never before could I offer them. So we always had to, I don't want to say dumb it down because we never dumbed our classes down, but we couldn't put super complicated ingredients that people had to make at home in them. This isn't,
But once again, you've got the on-site kitchen that you're making these things in, but you can't then make the cocktail with people in the same building.
No, and while restaurants are now allowed to sell things to go because of the pandemic, the liquor stores saw no movement and loosening of the laws for us. And I get it. A lot of liquor stores experience exponential growth, and restaurants were just trying to survive.
Yes. Yeah.
But, California just made a law, I want to say within the last 18 months, might be a little longer than that, where if you go to a nail salon, a hair salon, they can serve you a drink without a license if you are buying or their service or goods. Which is wild to me.
I'm going to need a diagram. This is not fitting in my brain.
Right. And then we, of course, have legal marijuana in California.
Indeed.
And Costa Mesa just opened that up. And there are 6 dispensaries within 100 feet of my building, which is, I'm all for marijuana, bring it. But we're loosening others, and still we have these antiquated alcohol laws.
Right.
Countrywide, obviously, but
Put a pin in that for 30 seconds just because I've got a very quick question. If I buy a sandwich from you and I buy a ready-to-drink cocktail from you in the refrigerator at the front of your store, and I take that outside and I sit at one of your tables that's outside at your front door, can I open that ready-to-drink cocktail and consume with my sandwich?
no. Someone's getting in trouble, whether you in an open container or myself for letting you do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
It just seems like half a law. It just doesn't seem to take into consideration how people operate.
Right.
Wow. Okay. All right. We don't need to belabor that point. The point has been made. So Josh and I have been talking, and in season 7 of the Podcast, as we call it, we have been talking to retailers, and we've had Bikram from Massachusetts, and we've had Holly from upstate New York, and we've had Anthony from New York City, and now we've got Gabby in Orange County here in Costa Mesa. And we're trying to figure out this retail landscape. Mm-hmm. And there's a number of hypotheses floating around for why sales don't seem to be as strong as, not even pandemic year, but even 2019 numbers. And one of the things we're talking about is the rise of marijuana. And you've just said, 6 dispensaries within 100 yards of where we're sitting right now.
Yeah.
Do you think legal cannabis is taking away sales from retail, from liquor retail?
I do. I think that we have a changing demographic, right? Boomers are getting older, and the younger demographic also doesn't happen to have as much wealth. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's contributing as well. Mm-hmm. I think people are there's entire swaths of the community who are not drinking as much or not drinking at all.
Okay,
which is wild, but is happening. I mean, we have never sold non-alcoholic but mocktail style non-alcoholic. Obviously we have soda waters and stuff, but we have a section now because people want it. They come in and they ask for it, and we have it. But
Does a little bit of you die each time, or are you?
I feel
cool with a
like
sale?
if it passes my like quality check, then I don't feel so bad about it. But I've tasted a lot of garbage.
Yeah.
I mean, half of these bottles are selling for $40, and they're distilled water. Literally. They are flavored water.
I wish our listeners could see your face right now.
And they're $40. And I'm just like, So I preferably, like, I'm not buying, alternate agave or alternate whiskey or alternate gin. Like, you can't convince me that they make any sense. But there are lots of other things out there that are interesting. A lot of them have like adaptogens and, and I've drank them and they're tasty and we're happy to carry them if they pass the quality check.
Okay.
And they make sense.
Okay.
Because the other thing is a ridiculous pricing for what it is. Like I mentioned with the water distillation. But we got a few quality checks to pass to get in here.
Okay.
And then I don't mind it. But yes, liquor sales are down all around. I'm hearing it from all of my reps.
Right.
They're saying it,
Right. Do you think you were just saying this a moment ago as well? Retail sales went through the roof during the pandemic. And while some of the high-end stuff did okay, it seemed like people were really reaching for their Jack.
Right.
They were really reaching for the known, the established.
Right.
You're curating a selection that isn't including things like that.
Right.
How do you balance that? You and I, while the delivery was being made, we were talking about the Campari that you do have on your shelf, and it sticks out like a sore thumb because I wouldn't expect to see it, but you're being asked for it, and you carry something that people are asking for. How do you balance? How do you work a curated selection while?
The funny thing is 6 years ago there weren't Campari and Aperol substitutes, really. And now there are lots. Some are good, some are bad, some are way better than they are. But we found that if we did not have Aperol and Campari on the shelf, people were less likely to take the suggestion of buying the thing next to it.
Oh, interesting. Oh, that's wonderful.
It was like, well, we don't have what you want, but we still want your sale, so buy this.
Yeah.
And they pass and leave. But if there's, a Cappelletti that's sitting next to an Aperol, and I'm like, I know you're reaching for the Aperol, but like you got to try this one. It's 10 times better. It doesn't have artificial coloring in it. Like there's a million reasons why, and they often will pop because also they're cheaper.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean Cappelletti is like $21 a bottle. Aperol, us selling it as a loss leader because we can't compete in any
you're just
realm
not buying
with
the volume,
pricing.
right?
Is we're selling it for 32, I think right now. Maybe 30.
Wow.
Yeah, but they're Italian imported spirits that don't have a giant marketing campaign. So
I'm just my mind is boggled that having it on the shelf will lead to somebody buying the recommended product next to it, but not having it will lead to no sale at all.
I feel like it lends a little bit of trust. Like,
Yeah, right.
you have it. Yeah, you can absolutely buy it, but
Do you think there's a safety net there for the consumer? Like if they don't really want to make the leap that you're suggesting, they could still walk out with that Aperol under their under their arm?
possibly.
That is so cool. I've never heard that.
There's got to be some sort
my
of
days.
psychology underlying in there.
For sure, for sure. Oh, I love that. Okay. Now I've lost my train of thought. I'm so bamboozled that is so cool. All right, so what we're talking about, sales being down, pandemic. Did people over purchase during the pandemic? Have people simply returned to vacations and dining out? Do you get that sense? You're at least somebody who's had regular customers and you've known their buying habits. Are you seeing changes in the people whose buying habits you know already?
Yeah. We have I have a couple mezcal nerds who will come to all the mezcal tastings. They used to buy everything and now they buy way less, and then they'll show you pictures of their collections, and it's just it's insane. And I get it. I also have a bar that I will never consume everything
same.
in. I have
Sure,
gotten
same.
a little less ridiculous about hoarding things that I don't want to open, because I also have bought collections from avid people who have collected their whole lives, and then their kids don't want it. Like, so then they don't know what to do with it and they're 80. So I don't want to be that person. So I am drinking things that I maybe wouldn't have prior to.
Right.
But yeah, I think people bought, they hyper concentrated on a category that they were into. They overbought, and now, you know, that same mezcal nerd is buying like something to go with the mezcal, maybe, you know, a Mexican gin that we got in, things like that. But they are definitely not buying as much of that niche category that they were into.
So how do we get around that? Because bills have to be paid, lights have to be kept on. What's the next wave of getting people to open their wallets?
I wish I knew.
Hope you don't feel too put on the spot right now.
We're just trying to constantly show people new things. And those, our classes are really good at doing that. We have wine clubs that our spirits people are now signing up for. And we have a spirit club that our wine people are signing up for. We have our cocktail club is starting up in October, where every month you get a different bunch of booze that makes recipes that have been vetted by us. And that really is, I think, the way, is to show people something new.
So it sounds like we're back to selling expertise, right?
Yeah.
That there are things, there are ways you can show people to enjoy perhaps even the things they own.
Right.
Your comment earlier in our conversation about you could take 3 base ingredients of a cocktail that you love, swap out each one of those 3 and have a completely different cocktail. What if those other 3 ingredients were already on your shelf?
Right.
But maybe you pay for the expertise along the way. Maybe that's the aspect of it.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a few years of expertise that I'm an open book. We get, I get customers who actually have, other companies that might be in food and beverage. And I'm like, please ask me questions. I will share with you, because, I remember working for that group I spoke of earlier, Vaca Group, and in the original first restaurant called Broadway in Laguna Beach in 2011, people were sometimes asking for recipes and I was initially concerned about sharing them. Mm-hmm. And my mentor, Ahmed Labat, who owns both of those restaurants, he was like, Gabby, you could give people your whole recipe book. No one's going to make the drinks as good as you do. They just there's something that is just missing. And I took that to heart, and I would write, customer won't like to drink, I'd write the whole recipe out for them.
Wow.
We do so every month with our classes, and I have no problem in telling people how I do things. I'm also an oversharer. I think that's a symptom of ADHD. So stop me if you need to. But yeah, I think I got lost there.
Yeah, just kind of how we still make this work when customers aren't leaning on a retail store to walk out with a bottle. Do you spend any time thinking about DTC, direct to consumer, or is that another realm where you think you've got something that others don't? If one of the things we keep talking about is the rise of American spirits.
Right?
Does it negatively impact you if a distillery in Kentucky can ship direct to a consumer, a la a winery, a la a craft brewer?
I don't think that affects my shop necessarily as much as it affects bigger box stores, as much as it affects larger volume places. For us, we are a small niche, and we are a lot about hand-holding and the experience of coming in here. We have 5 unique employees who are super happy to talk and get geeky or nerdy or leave you alone or whatever you want when you're here. And that's what sets us apart. So you can direct ship, but I would think that would be especially for reorders, especially not if you're looking for something new and you need, a little help in your home bar making cocktails.
Do we want to talk shipping at this point?
Sure.
Do we want to talk the opening of regulations that would make it easier to ship outside of California?
You know,
You ship spirits specifically outside
yeah,
of California?
I think spirits shipping, you know, it just, I
You
think.
can do wine, right?
Yeah, we can ship.
Outside of California.
Yeah, outside of California, we ship lots and lots of things outside of California. Wine things.
Lots of wine things.
But, you know, each state wants their taxes.
Yes.
That's what it comes down to. You can apply for permits to ship alcohol into different states, but they make the cost is low, but the effort is high or almost impossible.
Okay.
Because, you know, we inquired in one state and they told us, yeah, the fee's only $150. All you have to do is go through what you want to ship here and make a list and then get a request from the distributor in your state, as well as the product, whoever makes
my
it,
gosh.
get permission, then make sure that we don't already sell it in our state. And if we do, then you have to get permission from our distributor. So it was
wow.
you know,
That's a lot
a
of-
laundry list of things that are not possible to
Yeah.
complete.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a store with, you know, 2,000 SKUs. So they, you know, and that I think just comes down to they want their cut of the pie.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
But they really, I mean, I heard like rumors of USPS opening up shipping of alcohol. That would be brilliant.
We keep hearing it, right? It's still an ongoing rumor.
Things are slow to move.
Come on, USPS. We're waiting on you. Make it happen. But also makes me wonder if you could if state governments could set up some kind of reciprocal agreement where if someone buys from you, you're in California, they pay the California tax.
Amazon's doing it. Why can't
that's where you are,
independent
right?
stores do it?
Right? Go on, buy something from Illinois, pay it in Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you could be in California buying from Illinois, but at some point someone in Illinois is going to buy from California.
Right.
Like, could we just assume it's going to come out in the wash? I know that's not governmental thinking. That is man on the street thinking.
Right.
And if the Onion has shown us nothing, it's that the man on the street is an idiot. So,
Well, I mean, we have the access to these amazing algorithms and computer programs. I mean, they've got AI and everything's on our doorstep. But, you know, we use Shopify. They have the wherewithal to be able to decipher an
Right.
IP address and apply the tax code.
Right.
I don't know why it can't be as easy as that.
Right.
I mean, you do then have to rely on the retailer to pay, you know, possibly 48. I'm not shipping to Alaska or Hawaii. It's tax bills at the end of every month or quarter, which seems crazy.
but that's why I'm saying don't even do that. Right? If that person
Yeah.
in Illinois buys from you in California, they just pay the tax to California.
Sure.
You have your California tax bill that you pay. Like, let's not get into 48 tax bills every quarter.
Right.
Like, let's simplify this. That's the way. I think that makes sense, perhaps.
It makes sense until you get to the states that do double taxes on liquor.
Are you suggesting Washington State's not going to
There's
play
a
this
few.
game?
Yeah. You know, they're just not going to be satisfied anyway.
Arkansas is really not digging this plan. Really not digging it. Although people in Arkansas want to buy good shit.
They
so.
certainly do.
All right, tax. It's always tax, isn't it? Josh and I have said this for years and years. Follow the money, right?
Yeah.
Where's the tax going? That's
Everybody
the final
wants to
hurdle
have
here.
their hands in their pockets.
Right. But do you think it'll come? Do you think it will? There'll be some solution done because so many people want it.
It's going to have to come down to a corporation with a lot of money.
There you go. Well
Pushing
said.
it.
Yep. Very well said.
I mean, that like ultimately is what someone gets fed up that works in a multi-billion-dollar company, and they're going to figure out a way to get it passed because they've got the money to do it. They've got the lobbying expertise.
So an Amazon, a Costco, a Walmart could be the
linchpin that opens it up.
There you go. So
Yeah.
while on one hand, some retailers are worried about losing business to, if you can buy your Johnny Walker from Amazon, why would you ever leave your house again?
Right.
Maybe to go to your job, but who knows? But again, you're not in that pool.
Not in that
you're
pool.
Not
We don't
losing
sell
that
things
consumer,
like that. Right.
Right.
And it doesn't really make a lot of sense for Costco to carry many of the things on our shelves. So that's not necessarily a fear, but we've had some interesting things happen over the years. Like, we work with a lot of very small distributors, and one of our distributors made a Manhattan kit and put it into Costco's, literally like the Manhattan kit. Like those guys were coming in our shop, looking around, and they made it, and it had Willet
Oh my gosh.
and Scrappies, like all amazing products that we sell. And could you imagine my dismay?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Were you a grumpy Gabby that day?
I was a grumpy Gabby.
Did some choice words come out your mouth?
For sure. I was, and the guys over there definitely had to hear it too, the distributor, because I was like,
You made a phone call?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
Showed up on their doorstep?
I mean, they said sorry with allocations.
Wow. Wow. I'm curious how far down the rabbit hole we want to go. One of the questions we tend to finish on, and there's no rush to have a 30-second answer or anything. It can be another part of the conversation. But what does the future hold? What's got you excited? What's the stuff that gets you jumping out of bed in the morning? It's another one of those faces. How do you fight the slowdown in retail? You know,
Yeah.
but without being maudlin about it, right? It's exciting, and you still love having a store and marketplace. And
You know, I really like the creativity of the American distillers these days. I feel like there's
nice
interesting
answer.
things coming in all the time. Sometimes, you know, when it's slow, it's hard to remember to continue to look for those items because, you know, you've got budgets and you're trying to stick to them
Sure.
so that you can, you know, continue. But that's also why people love us. And so to walk away from things like that is hard. But like there's a female distiller at the end of Long Island. Her distillery is called Matchbook Distilling. Her name is Leslie.
Okay.
Forgive me, Leslie. I will not attempt to remember your last name at this moment. But she's amazing. And her spirits are kooky in the best way. Like, I can always find something new and exciting. They don't always hit for me on a retail aspect. If I was in the bar still, I could literally turn anything that she produces into an amazing cocktail. But, you know, she's got like a Sunchoke eau de vie, which like super cool and interesting and delicious, but it's hard to sell a Sunchoke or eau de vie to like a regular consumer. But that being said, it would go amazing with like a small amount in like a martini.
Okay.
You know, give it some earthiness and interest. But she's also got like, you know, a different fruit Amaro coming out seasonally. Like she's done a squash one. She's done strawberry and blueberry and peach, and they're all amazing. They're not, you know, Italian Amaros in that like general sense, but they are unique and they are delicious and they are balanced and they make great drinks. And I am definitely like waiting to see what she's up to next.
Okay.
So those are the kind of things I mean when I say like the ingenuity and creativity of American like producers.
For international listeners, we're sitting here on the very edge of the West Coast.
Yeah.
And you just immediately went
As
to a
far east
producer
as I could.
3,000 miles.
Well, she came out recently. We had a nice like field trip. We went out to a few restaurants and bars in LA and with her distributor out here, which is Rocksteady. He's his name is Gino. He's, you know, been around. He's worked in the New York restaurant and bar scene in Australia and in LA, and has been a distributor out here for a while now. And his new-ish company is really he's really ethical and really like almost to his own demise. He sells like the best of the best. You know, he doesn't have any well spirits.
Okay.
But everything's amazing and delicious. And he's people I want to support.
Okay.
You know, and he's got her in her book and his book, and he's got some amazing mezcal producers and some amazing rum producers. He's got a little bit of the PM Spirits book.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
got the Père Labat rums, the 8 years. Amazing. Yeah. So those guys are keeping me interested in spirits. I'm really having fun with wine because wine, you know, I'm classically trained with wine is that I came up in like restaurants, fine dining that had like ridiculous wine lists with DRC and stuff on the lists.
Okay.
And I had the fortune of, you know, being that salty bartender, which every sommelier loved. So they would always bring me little tastes of things that their customers brought in or vintage stuff that they got to open. And that that is a little bit contrasty to what's kind of happening out here with wine right now, which is, push towards natural wine.
Yes.
Which, I've got friends on both sides. Trying to straddle in the middle is pretty interesting. But, there's flawed natural wine out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
And it's pretty bad, some of it. And there's a lot of really great natural wine. And then there's a ton of wine that has always been natural and does not get classified as natty. And, there's everything in between. And I can appreciate both sides. I buy my agave spirits in that way, and you want unadulterated, fucked with tequila products and agave products, and I want the same thing from my wine.
Now, as you mention it here, I realize I've made a huge mistake in our conversation. Would you say that the spirit you're most passionate about is agave spirit?
It has been for a long time.
And we have not talked to it, and our listeners know we've done episodes on it. And
yeah.
So yeah.
We got a couple minutes.
The time. Yeah, we got a bit more time. Talk to us. What should we be looking out for in agave? What is a good place for us to spend our money right now?
Avoid all celebrity agave.
100%.
100%, right? That's like a basic general rule.
100%.
I have a couple noms that I'm just I just continue to buy, almost when I look up on the shelf and I'm like, wow, I have a lot of Felipe Camarena. I have a lot of Cascoine in different, different labels.
Yeah.
But I just tend to go for, the same, quality. Mm-hmm. And then when it comes to mezcal, I don't have any aged mezcal on my shelf. I'm an unaged mezcal person. I guess people do like some aged mezcals, but for me, what's so unique and beautiful about mezcal is that it is the most terroir-driven spirit category. Mm-hmm. You get no better sense of place than opening a bottle of mezcal that is true, and they've got mezcals that are coming in at 40%, and if you're buying a mezcal that's 45% every single time, then you have something is either being added, whether it's water, which is sometimes, that is a thing. And then sometimes they're, adjusting it with colas or puntas to get to the right proof to have it every time. That being said, if you're buying an agave that's changing all the time as far as ABV goes, they tend to always have, you go and visit and there's a donkey and a mango tree and you get it in the bottle. It's there. Uh-huh. The native yeast and it's so different going to Kentucky and watching how it controlled everything is, and then going and seeing, the natural fermentation happening. The, nephew or the son who's 8 years old is digging the bagasse out of, the vat by hand in buckets. I went to Guadalajara, right, and visited some of the distilleries or palenques that they use at Mezonte. And these guys are in Guadalajara, which is in the region of where tequila is made, and they've been making agave spirits longer than anybody in those areas. Yeah. It's generational, and they can't ride the tequila coattails, right? Yeah. They have to call it something else. Sometimes they're even fighting to be able to call it mezcal these days, and it's wild. That's money, right? It always comes down to money.
Absolutely.
But we sampled mezcals that are produced in stone, earthen, fermentation tanks that are underground. Awesome. And then they are dragged up a hill that's 50 yards uphill to a tree trunk that is the still.
Yeah, yep.
And drinking those, they change your world view.
Yeah.
Real quick.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of another spirit category where I can get earth and green vegetal and funk and fruit and, it's wild. I love it so much.
It's such an exciting category. Do you share some of the concerns that for it to be successful, it will change the practices, it'll endanger certain agaves?
I mean, it's almost like it's cannibalistic, right? For it to be this successful or popular, it's going to slowly implode. I mean, it definitely feels like doomsday-ish. I think that was, the start of the modernization of tequila was like, how do we upscale this, right?
Yeah.
And then I kind of look at it as like a bell curve where some of the modernization absolutely benefited the masses and being able to drink it. But then once we just took it too far, right? Now we've got vanillin being added and, all these different additives that are added post-production. And we're taking unripe agaves from outside of the regions and putting them into diffusers. And you just don't know what you're drinking.
Yep.
And you try to rely on websites like, Tequila Matchmaker to guide yourself. But ultimately, go to a retailer who gives a shit.
A certain message was delivered there, Gabby. A certain message. Real fast, as someone who is curating and seeing the world, you said rum never quite hit. Is there something you're seeing building? Is there a spirit that is being talked about more than you've seen or heard previously?
Agave for us is like the number one at this point. We are struggling constantly to have a selection of agave, especially tequila, on the shelf that has like all price points, but is still made in an ethical and sustainable artisanal way.
Yeah.
Because we used to have a great leader that we would use in margaritas, Cimarron. We still carry it. But, the price has gone up. We have bottles of Blancos that have gone up by $30 a bottle.
Wow.
And that, it is what it is.
Yeah.
We cannot make agave mature faster. Well, climate change is helping a little bit. But the appetite for agave, especially in California, is far passing the ability to produce it.
Yeah.
But we get, a small allocation of Fortaleza. About maybe every 2 months it changes. Sometimes it's every quarter. Also depends. Like Añejo, we get a little bit less than we do the Blanco and the Repo. But we've had to change the way we sell it. We can't put it on our website. We don't, because it'll be gone while we're sleeping.
Wow.
We started by just limiting it by one per person, and then we had to go to one per household because we had multiple people in the same household buying multiple bottles. And each of them is surprised, like, why can't I? Well,
yeah.
I would like other people to be able to have it,
right?
And half these people are hoarding the bottles anyway, but
right.
Now you have to physically walk your ass in the store.
That's it.
And be a customer here.
Right? You got to support.
Yeah.
You got to pay your dues.
No more cherry pickers.
Right? Absolutely.
And then one we're strictest on is Fortaleza, because we're also not jacking up the price. We see Fortaleza being sold at other stores for Blanco for $100, Añejo for $200, and we're sub $100 on both of those still.
Wow. Wow, that's a huge difference.
Yeah, the same thing happened to us when McKenna hit that number one spot, and we've been selling it for $29.99 as our go-to. Here's the best bang for your buck in the store.
Yep.
And we weren't necessarily doing the price increase. Heaven Hill was, and we were watching, from one invoice to the next, it was going up $10 a bottle, and people were like, "What are you doing?"
Nope, don't look at me.
Don't look at me. But we're not, we don't like to carry products that we've sold for years and years and then see that price increase come from us necessarily.
Yes. Correct. No, we hear you. Well, it's always a pleasure getting to hang out with you. It's always a pleasure dipping into your expertise. We've never discussed cocktails, and so getting to hear from you today about cocktails was really cool. And I'm so sorry that I neglected to bring up agave spirits until the very last kick of the ball.
Not at all.
that La Palma that I bought from you a couple of years ago.
Oh yeah,
was one of the best things I've ever tasted.
Yeah,
even outside of agave spirits, just opening up to categories, that was remarkable.
They are all half of those are all unregistered. Oh my god, not certified mezcals, right? And the first person that brought non-certified mezcals in to me was like, we've been told we're crazy. And now, the best ones we sell are uncertified mezcals.
What a thing to look out for.
Yeah, they're so fun.
Awesome. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Fun.
such a great conversation with you and just I have her name right. It's Gabby Dion Warwick. Is that correct?
It is. That's her Sunday name. Yes,
That's her Sunday name.
Full Sunday usage.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, and in this I'm being very serious here, I am so glad that you remembered to ask her about agave.
Awkward moment. So thanks for your time today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you and not talking about the number one thing you're most passionate about.
Yeah, right?
Zoinks.
All I've been talking about are things Jason wants to talk about. And then agave.
I can't believe I had to talk about licensing.
Yeah. Nah, it was really great hearing that, and for me, you know, you being out here or out there in LA and talking with so many retailers and us having our conversations with Holly and with Anthony in a previous episode and with Bikram, you know,
Absolutely.
hearing these more modern challenges that some of these retailers are experiencing. You know, these are the conversations I want to be hearing, because a lot of people are starting to hurt. Purchasing habits are changing. France is throwing away 200 million liters of wine they can't sell because the demand is down. You know, I'm sure you read that headline. You know, it's starting to put these pieces of the puzzle together that talk about demand seems to be down for wine, for beer, for spirits. How are the retailers coping with this?
Yeah. I think it's interesting because not all retailers are created equal. And so you've got Gabby's out here doing this bespoke curation of cocktail ingredients, agave spirits, gin, scotch, bourbon. Mm-hmm. You've got Bikram leading the charge on IBs. You've got Holly at First Fill Spirits with is it an IB store? Is it
No,
it's a
it is
predominantly IB
a
store.
whiskey store. It's a whiskey store with a small rum selection.
Okay.
And it's typically the independent brands, independent bottlers, brands that they're simply passionate about and want to promote. You know, it is very much a passion project. It's unlike any other shop that I really know. Yeah.
Independent brands was the part that I was getting wrong, and so I was thinking independent bottling when I should have been saying independent brands. So that's spot on. And then I think when you get to Anthony and at Roma, you've got this on one hand careful curation of key brands, key offerings, but then by his own admission from the podcast, a store that is keeping the lights on and the doors open, right? What are people generally walking in off the street asking for here? When people are looking at the website, what are they asking for? And that brings me full circle to Gabby at Mixing Glass, who has Aperol and Campari on her shelves, but doesn't really want it there, right? That, oh my gosh, I have to tell you, now that the listeners have heard the interview here, and I make no bones about it when we're in the interview, when she said having an Aperol on her shelf or having a Campari on her shelf allows her to better make a suggestion to a customer and them following it was remarkable. Like, I really had my mind blown that if she didn't have Aperol and she didn't have Campari and she suggested something else, folk would say, nah, I don't think so, and leave the store. With them on the shelves saying, but if you actually take that one there, I think it's better quality and it's cheaper and I think it'll do more for your cocktail, people would buy it.
Amazing. They need that familiar item just to hear the news on something else.
Right? There's some kind of trust going on in there where that consumer is thinking, They're making a recommendation. If I don't take that recommendation, I can still take my familiar brand. They still have my familiar brand for me. But I could take a chance. and then they invariably do. How cool was that observation? I loved hearing that. I have thought about that a lot since she told it to me in the interview.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if some shop owners that, like you were mentioning before the interview, where their focus is OB, which makes sense in my opinion, with a smattering of IBs. If you've got some of those, the people on the shop floor, who see someone picking up a bottle of Laphroaig 10 and say, "Oh, but have you had this one?" They've also done a Laphroaig, right? See, those are the good salespeople that can do something like that, and make those suggestions. But those suggestions cannot or may not be heard unless the big brand is there for them to open their ears. Wow.
Yeah. and I think to a degree we all shop with an element of comfort, right? It's nice to feel familiar when you're then taking a chance. And one of the things I've said for a few years now is if you walk into a lot of liquor stores and there's a enormous bourbon selection, and so much of it is a brand name, all being distilled at the same distillery.
Yeah.
And there's an absence of comfort standing in that section. It all feels like the ground is moving beneath your feet, right? And so and so there you go. You know what? I think I will just take a Wild Turkey 101. I think I'm good, thanks. And I'm back out the door again. So a little bit of comfort and a little jumping off point, I think, can make a world of difference to how we buy and how we learn more about any given category.
Yeah. There you go.
So there you go. And I have to say, the sandwich that, because the mixing glass is also a market, and Gabby makes sandwiches, the sandwich we had for lunch before the interview, I still think about it. It's just, and I lead, as listeners heard, I led the interview talking about the sandwich. It's now been, I think, 3 or 4 days, and I'm still thinking about it. It's such a good sandwich.
It feels as if we've talked about this before. Weren't going through school? Weren't you voted most likely to eat a sandwich?
Always.
You love your sandwiches, Jason.
I tell you, sandwiches. Me and Sweet Scott, we're all over the sandwiches. It's a good place. All right. Well, like you just said a second ago, Joshua, sincere thanks to Gabby for the time, as we took that little break in the interview to have a delivery, and she was placing orders right before we hit record button, and then she was placing orders right after we finished. And so she gave me time in the middle of a busy afternoon, and I really appreciate it.
That's great. That's great. Jason, I want to bring in the Paperboy really quickly just for an update.
Extra, extra! Read all about it! Life story of Playboy Penny! Extra, extra! Extra, extra! Read all about it! Me and that Playboy in trouble again!
I think it was last episode you and I told our listeners about some upcoming SCN bottlings, some bourbon, some American single malt coming. And that was meant to be bottled at the end of August. Mm-hmm. Well, it's September now. And now we're looking at a September date, as you do. Just some little snafus. These are, we were talking a little earlier on about the things that, sometimes people don't understand. And it's those inner workings and how a tiny little detail can change your plans and make you lose a week here and there. So, yeah, we had a bit of an issue at the bottling hall. Nothing big. The good news is, however, well, nothing big, but it did delay us by a couple of weeks. The good news is, however, because of that wait, we are able to bottle 6 casks of whiskey now instead of 4 casks of whiskey.
It's true. It's all true. It means we can send 6 casks of whiskey to the West Coast and not 4 casks of whiskey. So...
Yeah. So in addition to our Woodinville and to our Westward and to our Westland and to our Virginia Distillery Company, we are going to be bottling our 2 new wild turkeys. So I imagine many an ear have pricked up at the mention of wild turkey. It's something we're really excited for. We now get to bottle it a bit earlier than we had hoped. So that's good news, and we will be sharing more details on the release of these whiskeys as we're able to. Keep listening in here. Keep an eyeball on your emails if you're a Single Cask Nation member. If you're not, go to singlecastnation.com. Sign up. It's a free membership. You just create an account. Go to our private Facebook group if you're a member, and you'll find updates there. Am I missing anything, Jason? I think to me that was the biggest bit that we needed to share.
That's a big update. I was just sitting as you're saying, August has become September. The next round of casks for the rest of the world are scheduled to be bottled this month. Mm-hmm. As to Joshua's point a second ago, the emphasis is on month. So we've got a full month to get those bottlings done. And the next time we get Jess on wax, we will have her talk about what's coming down the pipe for ROW number 5.
Beauty. Well, cool. Let's. I know you had an email come in that you wanted to highlight.
I do.
I've got one as well, but why don't you print out your PDF?
Oh, I got it. I got it right here.
Oh, here.
I made my own paper for this to be printed upon, and I printed it. Using plant-based ink as well. So
good.
It's bled a little bit into the paper that I made, but it's going to be
use squid ink, Jason. That would have helped it.
Squid ink? No, please, no. No, that should only go in your pasta. That's a rule. Okay, so actually, we meant to include this email in the last episode, but here we are now. So this comes to us August 22nd, Nicholas Frangipane. And I did follow up for a correct pronunciation. The last name is Frangipane. And given that you and I can give Smith a run for its money, I figured that we would ask Nicholas for the correct pronunciation. And so Frangipane, Nicholas Frangipane. So Nicholas, and he does sign it Nick, so I'm going to use Nick as I'm talking through here.
Saint Nick.
Saint Nick says, "Hi J, and possibly J. In your discussion on the last episode of Extra Extra, about 40-year-old Glenfarclas casks maintaining high ABV, I was shocked to hear Jason's comments about the casks being filled as high as possible to preserve the ABV. I had no idea that some casks were filled to a lower level to allow more interaction with the air. I had always assumed all casks were filled as high as possible because casks are expensive and one would presumably want to stuff as much spirit as possible into each one." I see your face. We're coming back to it. Don't you worry, Joshua Hatton. Don't you worry.
Yeah, good.
I see you.
Yeah, there's some conflation happening here, I think. Okay, continue.
Nick continues. "I've now realised that cask filling is a big blind spot in my whiskey knowledge. What happens when a whiskey is recasked from a bourbon barrel to a sherry butt? Is there a lot of empty space? How do those filling machines work? Are they like gas pumps, or do they go by weight? I'm also curious about refill casks. I always assumed that distilleries just reused their own casks after dumping them. But I've recently heard that this isn't always the case either. How much does the specific brand of bourbon in an ex-bourbon cask affect the flavour? I'd love to hear any of the ins and outs of cask filling on the podcast. Nick.
Wow. Okay.
So let me come back to this this first paragraph, and then we can jump into some of those excellent questions that are being asked in the second half.
Yeah.
So yes, we've had a miscommunication in the first paragraph. Mm-hmm. So when I was talking about Glenfarclas filling casks, and I talked about them going higher, I was talking about higher ABV. So they were likely filling at 69.5 or higher. We've seen higher numbers than that on filling as well, rather than the industry standard of 63.5.
Yeah.
Sometimes you hear 62.5 banded about as industry standard as well. But I feel like I've heard 63.5 from more people than 62.5.
I've heard 63.5, I've heard 63.4, and I've heard 62.5. But then there's certain distilleries, just by matter of course, that have had a history of filling much higher. So Tamdu Distillery.
Higher strength?
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, a higher strength ABV. Tamdu has been known, I don't know if they still do, but there was a long period of time where their filling strength was at 70 to 71% alcohol. So it was a higher filling strength. I think regardless of what that ABV is, the casks are typically being filled to the rim.
Absolutely.
And yes, oxidation happens, but that's as angel share happens. That's as years continue and the natural loss of liquid and the natural gain of oxygen happens. It's most major producers are not filling their casks by volume lower. I know there have been some experimentations, and Ollie Chilton has talked about that in a previous episode. But yeah, to your point, Jason, what was in discussion about something being higher was the ABV, not specifically how much or how little liquid was being put into that cask.
Yeah, and even further to Nick's point in the first paragraph here is I would imagine over the decades that Glenfarclas were also re-racking those casks. And so, producers haven't always been forthcoming to discuss re-racking, not necessarily because they think they're doing anything wrong or anything naughty, but because there's not really a policy in place for re-racking. It's more just as warehouse people are moving casks around warehouses, like, oh, that one seems a little low. Or you dip in to check a flavor profile and you go, oh, I had to dip that quite far. We should maybe combine a couple of our low fill casks right now. Right?
Re-rack it into something, yeah.
Right. It's a moving target. It's to my mind, it's not one based on policy, but is reacting to circumstances.
Yeah, well, I think a good example of this, and this also ties into his other question of when you are re-racking from, say, a bourbon barrel, which is a 200-liter cask, into, say, a sherry hogshead or a sherry butt, where you're going into 250 liters or 500 liters, are you just going from one cask to one cask, one to one? And the answer to that, at least what seems common to my mind and what we know some distilleries have done is, let's take Kilchoman, for instance. And when they do some of their finishing in special casks, in a new cask type that they want to start playing around with, they'll take a number of bourbon barrels, marry all of that liquid together, and then fill to the brim those new casks. And the end product may be a larger release that is all of that whiskey and all of those final finishing casks combined, or that could be converted into the bottling of a single finishing cask. That seems common. One of our very first bottlings, the Aaron 12-year-old in Pinot, we were told that's what it was. They married bourbon barrels together, filled Pinot casks, and we bought one that had liquid that was in that Pinot cask for 4 years. But before that, it was a combination of a few casks. We bottled this single finishing cask, if you will. So that's sort of seems to be industry standard, to my mind.
Yeah. In some instances, when you speak to producers, they talk about the fetishizing of the single cask.
Yeah.
And the single cask exists at the end point. It doesn't necessarily exist up front, which is producers are putting new make spirit into wood, and they will see what happens to that spirit over the intervening years. When we then come along sourcing single casks, we say, this is as it has ever been, and we celebrate thee. And it's like, it's just a single cask today, right? It lived a life. It took a journey. A whole bunch of things happened to that on its way to being a single cask today. And I know there have been some consumers who then look backwards and go, oh, we've had the wool pulled over our eyes. It's like, no, the whiskey business was in the business of whiskey, and then we came along in the business of single casks, and we talked about single casks. Yeah. It's no, there's nothing nefarious happening with re-racking or topping off or changing location.
Exactly.
It's all good.
The only thing that's happening is you're starting to learn a bit more. It doesn't change the quality of that end product, how delicious it is, how worth the money it is that you spent for it. It's just now you know how do they say that? Now you know how the sausage is made. That's it.
There you go.
Right.
There you go. I'm going to combine these questions because I'm curious your experience. I know my experience here. When Nick says, how do these filling machines work? Are they like gas pumps, or do they go by weight? Clearly, weight is a part of it.
Yeah.
And they are filled. Now, here's the thing, like trying to get my memory straight here. Have you seen casks filled on scales, or do you see them being filled and then rolled to scales?
I've seen them filled on scales, but I think things are changing a little bit, and maybe I'm wrong here, and maybe I'm just looking at a single example. But the folks at the Glenallachie distillery, their filling mechanisms are programmed. So when they're filling a barrel and that's 200 liters, there's a setting for 200 liters. There's a setting for 250 liters. Of course, there's tolerances, and I imagine maybe it's 180 liters, and then they sort of top it off like you are at a gas station. But the reason that I know this is there's a story of the operations manager there, and he was showing people, we got this new system, and it's programmable. And I think someone played a trick on him and pressed the butt button, the 500 liter, and he's filling a barrel, and it starts spraying out, and he's snapping pictures as he's doing it. So, so there is that way of filling casks as well. And whether that's starting to become industry standard or is industry standard, I simply don't know. But I know there is the weighing system, and there is this system.
Yeah, and to my mind, several of the systems that I've seen have been like a gas pump. But think of this, Nick. The more you fill up the gas tank in your car, you know what that tank sounds like when it's getting full.
Yeah.
Watching the experience of those who work in the filling station, which is what they call the corner of the distillery where they're filling the casks, right? Watching the experience there, they're listening to that cask. If it's just a manual and they're filling it to the gunnels, as we'd say,
Yeah.
right. You start to hear the difference there, and they note it to ease off the handle as it's getting full. But you can also imagine, in this world of efficiency in which we live, having a computer programmed to put 200 litres into a 200-litre cask is going to be a hell of a lot faster, blah, blah, blah.
Well,
don't do it, industry. Don't do it.
no,
Fight the power.
Do it. Do
Fight
it.
the machine.
Oh no, I love it. Listen,
No, I hate it.
think about what Billy had to go through when he had 40,000 casks, whatever the number was, and had to re-rack it all. Think about what Ollie at Tormore is likely doing with his re-racking. If he has a re-racking program, having a system like that in place allows them to re-rack potentially in a faster manner, which simply gets that liquid tasting better sooner rather than later. And if it helps them expedite some of their things, I'm all for it.
Where have the humans gone? Bring back the humans. Here's a couple more questions, and then we'll get on to the email that you've got over there. Nick says, I always assume that the distilleries just reuse their own casks after dumping them, but I've recently heard that this isn't always the case either. And then I think the good one that we do have some examples for is how much does the specific brand of bourbon in an ex-bourbon cask affect the flavour. But before we get to that one, what are you seeing out there, Joshua, with reused casks? Clearly, distilleries are reusing their own dumped casks. But are you also seeing used barrels coming in from other distilleries, other Scotch distilleries?
Yeah, well, so I'm glad that you specified Scotch there, right? Obviously, bourbon and rye producers are not reusing their casks to create more bourbon and rye. That's just not possible. But from a Scotch whiskey standpoint, I see a lot of cask sharing happening. Without naming the distillery, there's plenty of whiskeys being matured in ex-Isla quarter casks. Right, so distilleries are sharing with other distilleries because they can't use them anymore or don't want to use them anymore for whatever reason. I think some of the more interesting relationships, and this may tie into that last question that Nick had asked, is where you've got larger companies that own both a bourbon distillery and a Scotch whiskey distillery, right? Lefroy uses Maker's Mark casks. It makes sense. It's a Beam-owned distillery. Now, are they doing that because that's the way it tastes best? Probably not. I think they're doing that because what a way to save some money. And does Maker's Mark make great bourbon to season American oak? Hell yes, it does. So it's just a nice little convenient match to save some money.
Convenient, the stars aligned, and they found themselves owning both types of distillery. What a coincidence. So I'm actually going to close out this final question by talking about Kilchoman, where Kilchoman have been putting out the partnership, the relationship, following the thread back to the original distillery to say, and I'm being very careful here not to throw around some distillery names that they're not using or not sharing, but they've run that path back to saying, that did come from such and such a distillery. Now you can taste Kilchoman in that distillery's casks. Yeah. This one over here came from that distillery. You can taste that distillery's style in these Kilchoman casks. And I when I first heard of that, it's probably been a couple of years now, if not a few years, since I first heard about that move. I think it makes huge sense. Look at what happens when we lead Whiskey Geek tours through a warehouse. People are reading bourbon distillery names off cask heads. Yeah. Say, oh, this came from there. That came from there. Oh, I'd love to taste that one from there. Like Whiskey Geeks. That's foreshadowing for what's about to happen with the next email. Whiskey Geeks want more information. We also said it a second ago about information, right? The question is, what do you do with that information, right? Like, remember, you've got an N of 1 where that Scotch cask came from that American cask. Don't go making broad sweeping statements about all Scotch in all casks from that distillery. Temper your expectations. But I think for that N of 1, I think is a ton of fun. I think it's a really great move.
Yeah, I think the best thing people can do with the information that they learn is hold on to it and learn more and put it into context with the other stuff that you've learned and keep on learning, because it's interesting when people have a little bit of information, it can make them very dangerous. And back to your point about people fetishizing the single cask and thinking, oh, they're doing this, that, and the other thing, and they're so dishonest. Nope, they're just going about the business that they had been going about for decades. You just happen to be learning how the sausage is made. Continue learning. Continue learning.
And so with the idea of continue learning in mind, you have an email. First of all, thanks to Nick Frangipane for a series of excellent questions, and I'm glad we could clear up our miscommunication there as well. But onwards, next email.
So we have an email from our very own Hop on the Bus, Gus, from Angus Smith, Gus or Jus, however you want to pronounce his name. I'll call him Gus. And the email subject is Rosé Water. And he says, "Howdy, fellas. Just finished listening to your excellent interview with William Dobby of the Isle of Rosé Distillery. Just a small detail that I wanted to clarify, and potentially something you may want to follow up on with Rosé for confirmation. To the best of my knowledge, all of the post-distillation water used, i.e. still strength to cast strength dilution and cast strength to bottling strength dilution, is water that has been reverse osmosis filtered. I believe the primary reason for this is to strip ions, particularly calcium ions, from the water to prevent the formation of oxalate salts. Calcium oxalate is the dominant of these salts and makes the majority of non-reversible flocculation material in whiskey which has been diluted during processing. Thus, using reverse osmosis water helps in eliminating the need for whiskey filtration. Yay! That said, reverse osmosis water... That was his yay, by the way. That was not my yay.
No,
but
I understand. I'm watching you read it, yes.
That said, reverse osmosis water has some of the lowest sensory character of any type of filtered water and would therefore contribute functionally nothing to the whiskey other than the effects of dilution itself. Thanks again for all the great content. You guys continue to kill it. Thank you so much, Gus Jus. And he says, cheers, Gus Jus.
Yeah, it's a cracking email because it speaks to what we just had with Nick there, which is information, education, distillery going about their whiskey business, but with a follow-up question. And one of the things we do here, is when a distillery says, "Oh yeah, we use this water." You're looking at it right now if you're on site, right? That water you're seeing there, we use in these numerous ways, and we go, "Okay," and then we move on to the next thing. I think not being said there is we process the water that you're looking at right there in numerous ways, and then we use it in numerous ways based off of the way we've processed it.
Yeah.
None of that gets said, which is a bit like, we fill a single cask and then 30 years from now we sell a single cask. What's not being said is we then have processes in place over the course of those decades that we do in-house. So I think it's a terrific question, and I'm curious on what comes back from Rassi on that question.
Yeah.
But he's right that osmosis water is not bringing anything to the table. Like, it's not adding to the sensory as he used in his email.
Yeah, I'm sure he is correct there. Some of the follow-up questions that I have to his follow-up question, or at least I've got one follow-up question to his follow-up question, because I don't know anything about water processing, is like chill filtration, are there levels to that water filtration process that allows you to retain certain aspects, certain minerals that you want to include that can contribute? And I ask this, and maybe the answer is yes, maybe the answer is no, but we'll see what we hear back from Raze. But William seemed somewhat convinced that their water is contributing something to it, and so I'm going to ask him the question, or I've got an email out to him, but I'll see if I can dig a little deeper into that.
Yeah, the other one that comes to mind, you're talking about levels of chill filtration, and I was thinking about levels of large particle filtration, right? Yeah. Where you've got one level that's basically keeping large splinters out of the final bottling, but you've got filters that get smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's not chill filtering, it's still large particle filtering, but it gets very, very small for what's being kept out. And so, yeah, I think that's a smart way to think about it as levels, as layers. And I'm now excited to hear from Rassi to learn more about water. It's not, water procedures are not things we're following up on. Yeah. And so I think this is a great nudge from Gus.
And you know what?
Down there.
I think it's a nice reminder to myself, to you, that sometimes we hear information from people, we, like you had said, we accept that information and we move on. And was a question missed? And yeah, I think a question was missed. So I'm going to try to keep my try to stay a little more focused and make sure I'm actively listening a little more to better ask some of these questions that Gus just asked.
But producers do it all the time, right? And again, I don't think Rassi's trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. No. But if you're engaged in the production of whiskey day in and day out, you're convinced that thing you do over there is a difference maker. That thing you do over that other bit is a difference maker, right? And that was one of the questions you asked William, is like, where do the differences lie? And it's the island, and it's the mountainous region, and it's the climate, and it's the grain, and it's the yeast, and it's the cask. It's all the things, it's right? All the things, yeah. And so to come to your defense, you can't ask all the follow-ups, right? Just so happens to have this follow-up.
Huge thanks to Nick. Huge thanks to Gus Just for sending in the questions. Those are really, really good questions. So I appreciate them sending it in.
Yeah, those are a couple of crackers.
If you would like to be like Nick and like Angus, you can email us. Send us in your questions. Send us in observations. info@singlecastnation.com or questions@onenationunderwhiskey.com. That's the best ways to reach us. Thank you again, of course, to Gabby Dion Warwick from the Mixing Glass. I really hope she doesn't mind me calling her Gabby Dion Warwick. Yeah. It's just
I'm just glad we stopped long enough to have the interview and didn't just walk on by.
Do you remember Dion Warwick had a hotline, a psychic hotline? She had a psychic hotline. It was amazing.
Yep. Absolutely.
Anyway, so with that in mind, am I missing anything? Are we at the point where we raise our glasses to our dear listeners?
We do. We absolutely raise our glasses and we say to one another and to Jess, see you in Scotland, and continued safe travels for each of us. Cheers.
Cheers.